Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderEd, BlenderHD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Monday, August 22nd, and we're about 3 weeks away from NFL. It's finishing up baseball season. We got about 5 or 6 weeks left in that kind of transitional phase. And as always on Mondays, we talk to James McCool, Mondays with McCool, the co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. Get in those thummy thumbs early in the morning. Helps us out. Good morning, Suki Singh, David Buchanan, Defect, anyone else watching, listening at home, whatever. But we mentioned that the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass that you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. If you didn't already know, as if you've seen on Twitter or on the show, an advanced edition will be coming out shortly, within the next 2 weeks. Okay, so I promised before NFL season, maybe next week, but hopefully before NFL season, and it will feature. From an audio perspective, my teachings of the applications of the concepts from the first course. So that's why it's a little bit more advanced. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff that you see me do on the DFS pregame show is kind of just all in one place. But as an extra value add, because a lot of the functionality and stuff that I do in LineupHQ can be done maybe a little bit easier in Excel. James, the Excel wizard, is including some Excel tools for you to use, and I've been testing them out the past 2 days. We're still working on them, but they should do pretty well. I mean, one of the main things I want to show off today, James, is I mean, you can go through like some of the tools that you made, but one of the ones that I show on this show a lot is trimming your portfolio based on ownership. Mm-hmm. So using ownership sum as a blunt tool, or ownership product as a blunt tool, to remove lineups. Like if you only had, while you 300 lineups, they all may be plus EV. You only want to pick 20 of them. Well, you'd rather pick ones that are lower owned and higher projected than the other ones in your run. And to do that manually is pretty time consuming. Yeah. So to do it kind of automatically via Excel would be much less time consuming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is one of the cooler tools. Well, actually, this is one of the simpler tools, right? So when you're doing it in your portfolio management for, like, if you're on LineupHQ, right, then what you have to do is you have to run your lineups, and then it'll show all your lineups over on the right side of the screen, and you look through and you're like, okay, well, this is the highest projected one, and this one has a product ownership of 200%, whatever. And then you go to the next one and you say, all right, this one is the first one was projected at 178, and this one is projected at 177.9, but the ownership now on that one is 210%. So it's like, well, why would I play a lineup that is lower projected than my best lineup in this run and higher owned, right? Like, that completely removes one of the levers of what we always talk about, of those 3 levers. So this tool, which is portfolio trim, instead of doing that through your entire portfolio on the website and just like Xing things out and making it a very manual process, you can just export your lineups from whatever optimizer you use, LineupHQ, post it into the tool, and then click a button, and it does it all for you. And it takes like less than a second for 500 lineups. I gave it the ability to do up to 5,000 lineups if you're really going hard. If it's like a full NFL slate or like full baseball slate, and you want to run literally every single combination, you can do up to 5,000 lineups in the tool, which is pretty cool.
Right, and I'll show that on the screen right now. So, like with the LineupHQ, I show you a lot of times. It's like, oh, I'm looking to just play 3 lineups, right? And you have your sets in here. Yeah, I don't mind this, I don't mind that. You have everything kind of mapped out, and then you build, let's say, you build as many as you want that fit those parameters. So I'm just gonna build 20 just for the sake of speed. Okay, so you'd go through and you'd be like, okay, well, you got 20 lineups here. right? This is just obviously just an example. I mean, you'd make whatever. There's no stacks in here. There's no nothing, whatever. So you'd look and you go, okay, this lineup, the top projected one is 107.77 as a median and 166.32 percentage total ownership sum. Okay. And then you go underneath and go, well, I wouldn't want a lineup that is lower projected and higher owned. So anything that's higher owned, since you're sorted by fantasy points, anything that's higher owned underneath it is a lineup that is theoretically less EV. Doesn't mean it's not plus EV, but the lineup above it would be better, right? So this next lineup projects for 0.22 less, but is actually 3.5 or so higher owned in ownership sum. So you'd be like, well, if I had a choice between 1 and 2, just based on these two numbers, I'd want the first one. So I'd get rid of the one below it, right? This one is 169.27, so it still doesn't beat out the ownership of the one above it. So I'd want to get rid of it, right? This one's 166.60. Okay, so this is slightly, right? It's slightly lower projected. It's slightly higher owned. It doesn't mean this lineup isn't good. It just means in comparison between the top and the bottom, this one and that one, the first one and the second one, this first one is slightly higher EV, right? So you get rid of that one. So you keep on going, go, okay, 172. So you just have to beat 166.32 if you're doing this manually, right? We go down. No, that doesn't beat it. That doesn't. Oh, 160.32. It's like, okay, this one is about six percentage points lower owned, but it's 0.62 lower projected. It's like, okay, that isn't bad. So now we go to the next one. So this 160 is fine. So anything underneath 160 below it, you'd rather have the lineup that 160. So you get rid of this one. Here's 160.69. It's close. Hey, these two lineups are very close to each other, right? From an EV perspective, probably really, really close. But the top one is slightly better. Slightly. Ever so slightly. So I'll manually get rid of that one, right? So I'm looking to beat 160. 160. Can I beat 160? 169, 161, 163, 162, 157. Okay, we got another one. 107.15 is this one. This is 106.92. 157.54 percentage points in ownership. Okay, that's a good one. In comparison to these two, as your projection goes down, your ownership goes down also. So we go to the next one, right? This one doesn't beat it. And out of the 20, this one doesn't beat it. Right, and that's it. We're down to 3 lineups. Okay, so this is what we're down to. Now, I probably should have, okay, hold on. I probably should have exported this beforehand.
Yeah, you probably should.
Right, I may not build the same exact lineups because I have like the build rules on 2. So I'm going to export this first. So let's do this again. I'm going to export these lineups before getting rid of them.
There you go.
Right. Okay. There we go. We exported them out. I'll open them up in Excel in another window. Move that to the side for a second. Okay, let's do this again. 166, 169. We'll do it a little bit faster. 169. We have to beat 166.32. 166.32. 166. Okay, here we go. Yeah, it should be about the same because I'm only running 20. If I was running 150, then there may be slight differences. 160.32. We should get down to those 3 lineups. 160. 0.32, 157.54. Okay, glad we got the same lineups. Okay, so we're down to those 3 lineups. So here we go. We got the 3 lineups that fit that parameter. That the lineup below it, for ownership versus projection, is about the same. Okay,
and that took about a minute, right?
Right, for 20 lineups. Now imagine doing this for 300. Imagine, I mean, this is the type of thing that you look at, like for baseball, you go, okay, let me run 305 3 lineups. Let me run 500 5X lineups. Let me run 300. And maybe you're only playing 20 lineups, but you want to get down to the exact ones that have the highest amount of EV amongst the parameters that you want. It could take a long time, a really long time. You're doing it manually. Especially even if you're going, I'm going to build 300 lineups and I'm only playing 3 of them. Like you're playing 3 max or you're playing a single entry, and you just want to compare you want to compare 12 different lineups together, right? You typically want to have a lineup that if it's lower projected, should be lower owned. Okay, so let me stop this screen. Let me share. I got to go back to here. Window. Let's go.
And we did defect mentioned that we had a really good coaching session this week, and it was really, really good. Like that was a great coaching session. I agree with that.
Okay, so I can't click over there. Okay, hold on. I have to get the right Excel tab.
You got this. I believe in you.
Okay, let's see. Window, portfolio trim. Is that it? Okay. We got. Okay, I've shared very. Can't really. Let's see. Can I make it a little bit easier to see? Yeah, close enough. Right. Looks a little bit bigger on my screen than it does on this screen. Okay. So I already put in the projections. Okay. So if you were to go to LineupHQ, let's delete these other builds. If you went to the player pool, there's this little button here. Okay. You can't see it on the screen because I have it on Excel, but near the upload aggregate button, you could download all the projections in LineupHQ. And you could paste in all of these columns. So name, salary, position, team, floor, projection, ceiling, projected ownership. And we'll make it easy for you by having the columns named exactly what the columns are in LineupHQ. Which is something James will have to change because I have to rename them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you put them all in. You just cut and paste. So they're all in. I mean, obviously there are people that aren't projected because they're not in the starting lineup. They're not, they're in the minor leagues or whatever. You have all of them. You could put whatever you want in here. This is not like sports specific. Yep. So this could be for football. It could be for anything. So you put that in. Then you have a spot to insert the lineups. So right here, there was dummy lineups in here before. You could clear them before. So now I'm going to take the lineups that we had earlier. I'm just going to cut and paste all of them. And there's enough spots for pretty much any sport.
It is for any sport. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to just cut and paste. So there you go. So here are the lineups that I exported from LineupHQ right here. Right. So I could go to trim portfolio. Right. This is from before. And I'm just going to click the button. Trim portfolio. There you go. There you go. Literally those. So we got the lineup in here in LineupHQ. So we should have a lineup that's at 107.77, which is what we do. We have a lineup at 107.15 at 160.32. And we have a lineup at 106.92 at 157.54. It'll also show you the price. It'll show you the floor projection, the ceiling projection. So it's like you could even use this to even inspect your lineups. Okay, so you could put it through. Well, we'll make it so that even on the insert lineup screen, that you could see all that information individually for each lineup. So let's say you want to just use this, not even to trim the portfolio, but I'm just going to insert all these lineups in here, and it'll show me this information that's on this screen right here for you. So we'll move that button over and show you all of them. So even if you just wanted to cut and paste 5,000 lineups in and just see like, what the projection versus whatever, no matter what you want to, and sort by any column or something like that. So let's say you wanted to sort by what out of these 300 lineups, which is the highest ceiling? Which is the high? I mean, you could do this for like even cash games, right? Compare the floor versus ceiling versus the median projection and go, while this may have the highest median projection, the fourth lineup actually has the highest floor projection, like that type of thing. So we'll add that in. So it's not just a portfolio trim. But you could see, but James, I mean, like, dude, imagine doing this. I mean, I could do this. Let's do this for 300 lineups. You want to try it?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just gonna run it, but I'm gonna run it with some actual build rules. So I'm gonna run 300 lineups, right? I don't necessarily care about salary. Let's say I'm going to run 5-man stacks. So I'm just going to run 5x at 100%, right? We're just going to build some more realistic baseball lineups. So build 5-man stacks lineups, 2 unique players, just to get some diversity. Maybe even add some randomness.
There you go.
Right? Well,
that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Just a little, just like, like maybe, 10%. Something like that. 10% for pitchers. Right, because it's going to show the actual projection, but you're going to get wildly kind of like different lineups. I'm doing that just so, like, it's going to be able to trim a lot more lineups because it's giving you kind of randomish type of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to run 300.
Yeah, and
Let that run.
This tool, so like Blender said, you're going to be able to look at this. Currently, it's portfolio trim, but I sent it over specifically because I needed this logic to be right in Blender's eyes, which it is. After that, then yeah, when you post it in, you're going to be able to go over to trim portfolio, and there's going to be a trim portfolio lineup, and then there's also going to be like a view lineups, view portfolio.
Just view all lineups. Right.
Where you're going to be able to sort based on, it'll be sorting on floor, you can sort on projection, you can sort on ceiling, and you can sort on range, because range is really, really important when you're building out a lineup for cash games, because you want to narrow a range of outcomes. So the range between the floor and the ceiling is important in those instances. So that there will be more math on it, but like Blender said, this tool is going to be applicable to any sport. Like, it doesn't matter. Whatever sport you're optimizing for, this is going to work. You're going to be able to load any projections that you want into it, whether it be your aggregate or whatever it is from whatever source you have. Like, it's a really cool tool.
Right, because you don't even need to, even in the projections, you don't even need all these columns.
No, you don't.
I mean, I know on the portfolio trim, it does show a stack type, like LAD in here for baseball. But I mean, if it's basketball, it's like you don't even need, like, do you even need the team?
No.
Like, you don't even need the position, technically, right?
Nope.
So really, you just need the name, salary, and hey, if you don't plug in the salary, it just won't show you that. It's just showing you 0 as your salary. Right. Same thing with the floor for the ceiling. Basically, as long as you have a name and a projection,
and ownership,
right? Of course, in order to trim, you need the ownership, right? Of course.
Those are 3 things you need here.
Right. So you don't even need floor, ceiling, you don't even need any of that for any of the sports. So let's we're almost done with the 300. Let's take a look. We're not going to do it manually for the 300.
No,
to make sure it did it right. We're not
understand that if you were doing this with 300 lineups, it's going to take anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. If you're really fast, it can take like 5 or 6
manually. You mean?
Manually, yes.
Right, not 5 and 10 minutes in Excel. It's going to take about half a second.
Yeah, it's going to take like 3 seconds, maybe.
I don't even think it'll take that. I did it before. I think it's even quicker than that.
Yeah, when I tested,
so I'm just going to export all these lineups. Like, I didn't even look at these. I'm just going to. Okay, I got 300 that fit. Whatever. It's a lot of. It seems like a lot of Brave stacks. Okay, so I'm going to export this. Right, just export into another. It's a CSV file. I'm going to open up. You're not going to see me open it up. Okay. Then I'm going to go. I'm going to cut and paste the whole thing. Just scroll all the way down to the bottom. Cut and paste. Okay. So now I'm going to go over here, right, and paste it right in. So there we go. You see here all the lineups right down to 301, right? And then I go here. Right, my screen isn't as wide, just for the sake of.
There you go.
Right, trim portfolio. Oh, it takes a second or two.
Yeah. Like I said, it takes.
Okay, there we go.
And there you go.
Yeah, out of the 300 lineups, these are the ones where the projection versus ownership goes down. And we can see here, right? Even the price, you can see, okay, look at a 47,300 lineup is down here. So it's like as the projection goes down, 106, 106, 106, 106, 105, 105.94, this is tied. And here's the ownership as it goes down. Now, obviously, once you get to the bottom, especially since if you're running builds with randomness, with unique players, whatever, obviously the tops of your builds are going to be like chalkier lineups. And by the bottom, you're going to get lineups that you're probably not going to play this bottom lineup. Like, even though it is the lowest owned, but I mean, it's also the lowest projected by far. Like, you may get differences down here. But then you could look here and go, well, which lineup do I want to play? Look how high this lineup's floor is in comparison to the ownership. Look at how about this ceiling. Like this lineup ceiling right here, it has a lower floor. Has a projection of 105.81, but has a ceiling that is higher than the top lineup. And it is 17 percentage points lower. So this may be like this may be a good GPP, like for a GPP perspective, this lineup over here may be better than the one up top. even though it projects for 1.01 less, but it has a higher ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Down here, here's a 216. Like, it's color coded, so you could even take a look. This is why, like, on this screen, like before the trim portfolio, the ability to look at them all and then sort is going to be important. Even if you didn't want to trim, so you'd be able to go and look and go, okay, let me sort by ceiling. Like, can I even do that in here? I don't want to break anything.
Highlight rows A through T.
Highlight row. Okay, I'm gonna do. You're gonna teach me. I'm gonna highlight rows A through T. Now what
Go
do I
to
do?
data up top in the nav bar.
Yep.
Click on the filter.
Click on the filter.
Click. It's right next to sort. There you go.
Yeah. And then
you can filter, and then you can sort by ceiling or ownership or whatever.
Right.
Highest to lowest.
Right. Sort ascending, descending.
Yep. Sort descending for ceiling.
Okay. I'm okay. Okay. I just have to click on the buttons. Typically I do this just by the column data.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're an Excel wizard and I get by. Right. Okay. Yeah. And then you switch by this and you go, okay, here's the ceiling. Here's the ownership. Right. Then you take a look at, like, even if you go by like we could even do that by ownership, like by ascending. So this is the lower own lineups. And then you can see here, like, even let's say we had 300 lineups. Let's say we didn't trim. You may be able to find the lineups that are like, okay, I like this type of lineup, and then trim the ones that you could get rid of, the ones that even if they were trimmed would still remain there, and go like, I just don't want these lineups. Right? If we made it so that you could see all of this before you trimmed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because let's say you sorted by price, and you just go, I'm going to sort by price, because let's say it's like MMA. Right, like MMA or Showdown or something, and like, okay, I'm gonna build hundreds upon hundreds of lineups or whatever, and then you build a bunch of lineups, and you go, okay, let me ascend by price, and go, let me look at the ownership based on the price, and go, this lineup is even though we're gonna have a dupe checker type of thing, dupe calculator, you may go and you go, okay, I don't want lineups that are 45, 50,000, 49.9, so you're gonna remove them before you trim.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they don't even get calculated in, is this lineup higher owned than that lineup type of thing? So maybe you use it for that. Maybe you get rid of lineups that are absurdly low floor or absurdly low ceiling or something like that out of 300 lineups, and go, just get rid of these completely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you search for a specific player and you go, out of these 300 lineups, I'm just choosing, I don't want to play Tipaquito Marcana in my line. Okay, then get rid of those lineups before you trim. But this is very, very, very much more efficient way of doing the same thing that I would be doing in LineupHQ. And then the great thing about this is that once you trim, you could just cut and paste these lineups right into Draftkings or Fanduel or whatever.
Isn't that nice? Isn't that just nice to use?
Right. And it's not that hard. Like anything that I did right here, I'm assuming it's cutting and pasting. I mean, it's essentially that's what you're doing, right? You can clear your lineups here, right? You clear the mirror, cut and paste over it, right? You cut and paste the projections, you cut and paste your lineups, you go to trim portfolio, and there you go. I mean, like, just very easy.
Some of the tools that are going to be included are a little bit more complicated, like the portfolio correlation matrix. That one is probably the most complicated one that's being shipped with the product. And the only reason why it's complicated is because you have to look at it for longer. Like it's not more complicated to use. It's literally just more complicated to utilize.
Well, we're gonna make that a little bit easier.
Yes,
I have a way to make it a little bit easier.
Cool, love it.
But awesome. Yes, but the portfolio correlation tool is meant that there is, from my knowledge, nothing that exists on the market that does it. In an optimizer, is tell you the correlation between players in your own portfolio.
It was hard to build,
right?
Because there was no point of reference, like
right, because no LineupHQ doesn't do it. And what we mean by that is not the correlation of players to each other, like a correlation coefficient, like on projection. Like, oh, Matt Olson and Vaughn Grissom are correlated to each other because they're both on the Braves. Like that's a normal player correlation. I'm talking about if you have Olson and Grissom in one lineup, how many lineups do you have Olson? What percentage of lineups that have Olson also have Vaughn Griffin?
Right.
How many lineups do you have that have Jeffrey Springs also have Julio Urias at pitcher? So you could look here, like we built 300 lineups, and you could see here in your exposure, it's like, oh, look, I have, let's go to especially like pitchers. All right, we go to pitchers and go, look, I have 91% Jeffrey Springs, 68% Julio Urias, and a whole bunch of like little lesser percentages. But it's like, it's quite possible that all 68% of Julio Urias lineups are with Jeffrey Springs. Mm-hmm. So you're like, well, I'm over the field. Look, I'm way over the field in Urias, and I'm way over the field in Springs, and I got Sonny. But the lineups that don't have Springs and Urias have Gray and Smiley.
Right.
Like they don't correlate enough. They correlate too much to each other. So let's say
the big thing there. Oh no, finish it up.
Right. So let's say you were like, oh, I'm good with my exposures, and I've always said on this show, exposures don't matter, lineups matter. Mm-hmm. So you'd be able to go with a final build. You go, okay, I got 20 lineups that I like. I got 100 lineups that I like, whatever. And I go, well, I got 40% of this guy, and I got 30% of that guy, and you think it's like, oh, I'm over the field, whatever. You're not realizing that like almost all of your lineups that are 30% of that guy have the other guy in it. You'd be able to then export your lineups from LineupHQ, cut and paste them into this portfolio correlation tool, and it will tell you. It'll say, it'll show you a chart of Jeffrey Springs, Julio Urias, and maybe it'll say 98%, which means 98% of your lineups and out of your 100, right, have that player and that player in the same exact lineup. So it's like, oh, maybe I should go back and kind of make it so that it doesn't work out, unless you don't mind having two players. Maybe all of your Urias lineups, like all 19% of your Sonny Gray lineups has a certain one-off in it, right? One-off batter in it. Maybe in football you have Chief stacks, but you also have like 15% of the Packers defense. And it just turns out that your 10 Chiefs lineups all have the Packers defense. Like it's like all, yeah, they may be different wide receivers and everything like it, but it just turns out that the way that you built that you think it's like, oh, I have 15% of the Packers, not realizing that most of your Packers lineups are Chiefs stats.
Yep.
And maybe you're fine with that. But if you want it to be a little bit more diverse, you wouldn't be able to tell just based on the exposure percentages. You'd have to actually look. But it could take a while to look and keep track of like who's actually in a lot of the same lineups together. Well, this will give you an inspection tool of just cut and paste your lineups. It doesn't matter what the sport is, right? Obviously, if you play baseball, you're going to see a lot of correlation between batters on the same team, right? A lot of lineups that have Vaughn Grissom has Dansby Swanson. A lot of lineups that have Acuna have Olsen. Like that should be normal. Yep. But if you have a one-off JTL Real Muto and you're not playing Philly stacks, and you see that all your Real Muto lineups are with a certain pitcher, at least be aware. Hey, you may be fine with that, but at least be aware, because what ends up happening is Real Muto hits 3 home runs, and then he's in all of your Julio Urias lineups that just gave up 8 runs, and you have a minus 16 in your lineup, and you're like, well, I did so well with Real Muto if he only wasn't in all of my all of that one lineup. So if you wanted more diversity, figuring that out, and you don't get that from exposures.
No, you don't, and you don't get that anywhere else. That's why this is such a cool tool to have, is being able to look at that and say the big reason why I like to have something like this and why I think that it's so powerful is you can build out all of your lineups and say that, because when you think about the way that an optimizer works, if you're going to have a whole bunch of Yankees or Braves or Dodger stacks, right, it has to find value somewhere. Right. So when you're building those out, you can see that even if you're well over the field on a Brave stack, say you have 60% Brave stacks or something, if you're way over the field on those and you didn't capture exposures on your value plays, so like Tucupita Marcano, right? If all of your Brave stacks have Tucupita Marcano, you're not only looking to rely on the Braves to do well, because if Tucapata Marcano does not also do well, those Brave stacks are very reliant on him to win you a GPP. It's the same thing with cheap catchers, right? Like Kyle Higashioka or something like that. If you have really expensive Dodgers stacks and the optimizer is like, oh, well, I have to find value, so here's this really cheap catcher. Say that you have 30% Dodger stacks and you have like 20% Kyle Higashioka, you can look at those things and be like, oh, that's not a drastic amount of a cheap catcher. I can deal with that. I'm fine punting catcher. But if all of those are concentrated in your Dodgers stacks, now your Dodger stacks are like really, really, really highly dependent on Kyle Higashioka also doing well. So the correlation there, we love correlation in GPPs. That's awesome. But you have to understand where the correlation is coming from and who you need to do well for things that, even if a Dodger stack is low variance, right? Like they have an implied run total of 6 or something like that. They look like a really safe play. It might not be a really safe, good lineup if it is completely dependent on both Tucapata Marcano and Kyle Higashioka doing well in order for you to actually have win equity in the GPP that you're in. So being able to see that and say, oh yeah, with my Dodger stacks, I have Mookie Betts here, and he has an 85% correlation in my portfolio to Kyle Higashioka, you're going to go back into that probably and be like, I should find my Mookie Betts lineups and maybe swap out a little bit of that and get this cheap catcher here, this cheap catcher here, and cut down your exposure of that correlation specifically so that you can increase the diversity across your portfolio.
Right. Just same thing in baseball with stacks. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I played out of my 20 lineups I built on LineupHQ. I played 10 Yankee stacks. I'm playing 5-3 lineups, but all my Yankee stacks are with the Mariners. Right. Yep. Just like, well, I'm playing 50% Yankees and I'm playing 50% Mariners. And it's like, no, you're really playing 10 lineups that have Yankees plus Mariners, and you didn't realize it because you're just looking at your exposure numbers. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Those could be plus EV lineups, but you may think you're more diverse than you really are. Mm-hmm. And diversity is a risk management issue, not is the lineup good? Is the lineup plus EV? It's the fact that on bigger slates, especially, you could build hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of plus EV lineups, or potentially plus EV lineups. But you're not going to play all of them, obviously, right? You can play max of 150, but a lot of people play less than that. And you go, well, which ones do I choose from? It's like, well, if most of these lineups are very close in EV, why don't I have a more diversified set so that my swings aren't as wild by having, 50 lineups that all kind of look the same, right? So that's the point of this. But understand that from a strategy perspective, this doesn't mean anything. As long as you're building plus EV lineups, you should be profitable in the long run. Right. It's a question of what's your journey of getting there, and would you rather be what's your risk tolerance? So let's say you're just building 3 lineups. I mean, a lot of people don't get the 150. Go 3 lineups. It's like, well, how many if I'm building 3 lineups today, I'm just using this slate as an example, even though I'm just barely looking at it. And someone will ask, should I use Jeffrey Springs in all 3? I'm like, well, that's just a matter of risk tolerance. Like, if he fits plus EV lineups, it could be any player. It doesn't have to be. Like, should I play Ronald Acuna as a one-off in all 3 lineups? It's like, is the lineup plus EV? If the answer is yes, you can. How much do you want to rely on Ronald Acuna in 100% of your lineups? That's only a question you could answer. If all 3 are independently plus EV, it doesn't matter mathematically what your distribution of the players are in your lineups. It's just a matter of, yeah, you could build a lineup with Jeffrey Springs that's plus EV. You could build a lineup without Jeffrey Springs that's the same exact expected value. You can build a lineup with Ronald Acuna. You could build a lineup. I'm gonna play a lineup that fades the most popular stack, even though it's the highest projected. How many out of my 3 should I build one with that? Like, dude, you have thousands of lineups to choose from for your 3, right? One could be a raised stack. One could be without this. One could be with. You could do all of it. Which 3 are you going to use? Mm-hmm. And if you're like, nope, I'm more confident that this team is so underowned, or this pitcher is so underowned that I just want to play him in all 3 of my lineups, then good to you. If you think that's the those are the best 3 lineups you can build, then you live and die by that person. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So that's why, like, getting away from thinking in terms of exposures and thinking in terms of lineups will make you much more profitable in the long term, because a lot of times you're either spinning your wheels dealing with exposures where you're not really doing anything. You think you're doing something when you're not, and then running into mistakes, running into things that you didn't want to happen. If you purposely are like, I want to play these 2 pitchers in half my lineups, and then neither of those 2 in half my lineups, as long as you realize that, then sure, yeah, build all the lineups you want. But there's so many times that I've talked to people that are like, that play a slate. It's not just baseball, anything, basketball, and go in MMA. Someone's playing 20 lineups. It's like, this guy that I only played 3 out of 20 of my lineups. Every one of those 3 lineups has this other guy that just lost, and it's like, well, which is fine. The lineup itself is fine, but did you intend on that? And the answer is typically no. Like, it just turned out that way. It's like, well, things shouldn't just turn out that way if you didn't want it. These tools should be building the lineups that you want to build, not ones that it's just going to use the instructions that you give it. So a lot of times you give it instructions to give you 50% of this and 50% of that. It's going to give you that. It's not going to care what lineups each of the players are in, though, as long as it fits the other parameters of, the maximum ownership or the number of unique players or whatever you put in, that you need to have this position in a utility spot, or what. Did it conform to all of your build rules? Yes. So other than that, it doesn't know any different, right? There's no such thing as a divert. Like, yes, a lot of these are diversity settings, such as randomness and unique players and max exposures and stuff like that. But it doesn't know that I don't want more than 50% of my Urias lineups to be with 50% of my Springs lineups. It doesn't. There's no setting to even do that. So it doesn't know. So it's not going to use that as a constraint. So the only way for you to know is either go through each lineup or to put it into a tool that hopefully could help you see and go, are you okay with having this golfer and that golfer in a lot of lineups together? And if you're fine with that, okay, then keep on going. If you're not, then you go, okay, I need to find a way. And a lot of times it's positionally and positional and salary related. It's like, why is this guy in with a lot of this? Why is this, right? Why is this cheap pitcher in with my expensive Dodger stack? It's like, well, because it's an expensive Dodger stack. And the only way to fit in an expensive Dodger stack is by having some type of cheap pitcher, cheap catcher, cheap shortstop, cheap something like that. So you're going to, now, if one of the cheap, let's say you needed a cheap outfielder in order to fit in that Dodger stack. Well, if you didn't put any max, like let's say on this slate on Jake Fraley or something, who projects for like 0.1 more than the next point per dollar or whatever type of thing, it's just going to give you so much of it because it's going to fit in all of your Dodger stacks. So how do you fix that? By going to Jake Fraley. I'm getting 40% Jake Fraley, and it happens to be all of my Dodger stacks. Well, set his exposures for 20, right? Which means that the other 20% is going to end up going to the next best, cheapest guy. Right. And then you see, oh, why am I getting so much of this cheap outfielder now? And you go, well, how much of that do you want? Well, no more than 10%. It's like, okay, so 20% of your Dodger stacks will have Fraley, 10% of your Dodger stacks will have that next guy, and 10% will have whatever the next guy is. That's the cheap. And now you could use the exposures to actually manipulate the lineups that you're building. And you're not thinking in terms of, I want 20% of this guy because he's X% owned. You're thinking in terms of, I'm just putting in the number 20 so that it ends up in only half of my Dodger stacks. You're not doing it for an exposure purposes. You're doing it to tell the tool what lineups to build. And that's really what you should be using the tools for.
Yeah, absolutely. I have nothing to add to that. That's perfect.
Okay. So this we'll be bug testing this stuff. We'll be adding some stuff to the displays. We'll show off more tools. I mean, the next week and the week after, whatever, right before NFL season, obviously we'll be showing off these tools a little bit more, and probably during the season. Probably, I may be on a Thursday going like, let's build some dummy NFL lineups and let's trim these suckers. Let's inspect these suckers. Let's see who's in these lineups that are higher ceiling and lower ownership, that are higher floor, that are lower floor but higher median projected, and people may not realize. right, that have higher variance. This is something that you could do in Excel yourself. Obviously, you have to be much advanced in knowing how to set these things up. I can't do. I could probably learn. I could definitely learn how to do this within a couple of weeks. But why? When I could, like the portfolio trim thing here that I did manually, I tried to do myself and I gave up on. Right? I tried because it's something that I would a process that I would normally do, and there's got to be an easier way than me doing this manually. And then I tried doing it, and it didn't. The closest I got was computing basically a binary number in a separate column that would show 1 or 0 depending on what's above or below it. But I had to make sure that the lineups were sorted by projection.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I had to make sure that the lineups were sorted by projection, and then I could run and go, if this lineup is lower, like I did it manually, comparison, but it didn't sort anything. Like it would just go in whatever sorted order it was. So if the sort wasn't by fantasy points, it would highlight the lineups that didn't make any sense. So that's as close as I got. And by the time I got to that, it's like, well, then how do I get rid of the ones that are zeros? So I'm like, well, I can sort by
manually.
Right. I sort by zeros and then get rid of those lines. And then it's like, this is almost more, this is almost as much work as me just doing it manually in LineupHQ. So it's like, I don't know. And I looked some stuff up, and then macros started coming. I'm like, okay, my eyes glaze over, and I'm like, no, I'm not close to as experienced in Excel for having me worth learning all of this in order to get it done.
It's much better to just pay somebody $100 to have it made.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Right. But that's the purpose. I'm getting a little bit of like, these are tools, these Excel tools. Just want to make it clear, just like I do with LineupHQ. LineupHQ is what I use to build lineups. Mm-hmm. These Excel tools will be what I use to build lineup. I mean, like the tools that I'm like, okay, we're gonna do an advanced version of this. I'm gonna record the audio. You're gonna make these tools. It's like, and you're like, what tools should I make? It's like, here's the tools that I want.
Yeah, exactly. That was literally the conversation that Jordan and I had. And we sat there for a little while, and I was like, all right, Jordan, you as a professional DFS player, just tell me what you need, and I'll build a full suite of the things that you think that you need.
Right. And that is accessible for newer players. I'm not all of this that I need.
Right.
But it's also something that would be easier to show. Like we have a lineup comparison tool. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily need that, but it's a use. If you want to plug into lineups and see the difference, like the solver, like one lineup optimizer for solvers, like the only reason we include that is because maybe some people don't have LineupHQ. They don't have like they want to be able to put in a whole bunch of projections and say, well, based on all these projections, which is the top lineup? Or if I get rid of this one player now, what's the next top line? Like that, a really simple type of thing that if you're a RotoGrinders premium member and you have LineupHQ, you're not going to need, right? Mm-hmm. Because you could just import the projections in here and just click the sidebar, right? That's essentially what it is. And then there you go. It's all filled in. Feel free to have all the Jake Fraley you want with your Brave stacks. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we'll be going over this behind the scenes, recording the audio and everything. It should be up before NFL season.
I'm going to yell at Blender to get it out before the end of the month. Every single day, I'm going to be in his DM saying, all right, get on it, man. Get that audio done. Let's do this.
Well, I'm recording this week.
Say it again.
I'm recording this week.
I know.
A lot of the stuff that I'm recording needs the tools.
That's why I talked over to you last Friday.
Right.
I totally hear you. Yeah, the tools are just they're really cool. And things that even Blender doesn't use, like the lineup comparison tool. What it is actually simulating two lineups against each other thousands of times, so that you can see, like, one, I think that tool as a concept is just showing people that the difference between two lineups can be very, very small and essentially a coin flip, right? So if you put in two cash lineups, the idea behind it is not necessarily to say, oh, this one wins 50.49% of the time and this one wins 49.5% 1% of the time, you should choose this one over that one. That's not really the concept here, right? The concept is to put two lineups up against each other and to show people the choice that you're making here doesn't really matter. The lineup that you are picking based on which one wins more times over time, it's basically even. But if you were to put in two lineups for GPPs, for example, where one has a higher ceiling than the other by, a nominal amount of points, say 3 or 4 points, then that is something that you would want to know. So the concepts there, I think that it's really just when you're going over the audio, the concept of talking about the simulations between two lineups and which one is going to win over time, it's just a good visual. And that was something that I think we lacked in the first book, was those visual helpers. And so tools like that are more visual stuff to help people understand the range of outcomes of two lineups rather than making a choice for you.
Right. Just like if you were to plug in all 300 lineups of a build of very close projections and go, well, which lineup is better out of this 300? And you go, well, pit one lineup against all the other ones. And you'll see the win percentage for the best lineup is 51%. And the worst lineup is 49%. It's like, and you're spending all that time to determine which one to play. It's like that dude, they're not all that they're not all that different, right? The really bad ones, yes, you'll see the difference between the really bad ones and the really good ones. But for the most part, if you get the balance of projection and ownership correctly, like, dude, you could build so many lineups. Obviously, in some sports, you need the correlation lever. But for sports that don't have much correlation, we'll be getting the basketball come fall, and people will be debating these 2v2s between the 2v2 projection difference is a half a point, and really just, dude, close your eyes, pick one out of a hat.
Yep.
Right, and then you go, oh well, this one has a slightly higher ceiling project. I'll go, okay, maybe it's slightly higher. Plug those two lineups into this lineup comparison tool in Excel, and then press the button. And obviously, you're only simulating about 1,000 times, so it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to get 50-50. Or you could put in the same lineup twice, and it still won't come up 50-50 because you need a sample size that's still in infinity. It'll come really close. It'll be like 50.82 versus 49 because it just so happens on one simulation run it's slightly off. But you plug in those lineups and you run it like that 2v2, you'll see that the margin, the difference doesn't even matter. Right? It's 50.3 versus 49.7 at best, and sometimes it flips to the other way. Right? So you go through and you're just like, well, why am I spending a half an hour debating between these two? But you may look and you go, well, one has 1 point higher ceiling. Right?
And if that's the differentiator that you need to make the decision,
right? And then there you go, and then use it that way. One has a 2 point lower floor, and you go, well, I'm playing head to head or whatever. Maybe I want the lineup that has, even though it has a half a point less ceiling, but it has a 2 point less floor. Let me go with the one. But you still, if you ran it out based on median, like it's 50-50, right? So if the peace of mind is that this one has a slightly lower range of outcomes, even though the median outcome is the same, like you'll find out after doing that for a while that like you're making decisions. You're spending way too much time on those decisions versus getting to those two lineups to begin with.
Right.
It's like you should be spending most of your time on the decisions that matter, and the least amount of time the decisions that don't matter. Not don't matter in result. So we argue, like James, in soccer, we always joke around. Goalkeeper, not a decision that matters. Yet it will determine whether or not you win or lose. I mean, it's like that's going to be just like defense in football. It's like whoever finds that 24-point defense, like they're the ones that win. They're the ones that won a GPP. But it's like should you be spending 6 hours trying to find it? No, because the variance of that position is so high that the projection, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't. You shouldn't be spending that much time because it doesn't matter.
That was a big sticking point. DFIC in the chat mentioned the coaching session that we did. That was a huge sticking point because he was talking about, well, it seems like such a complex, never-changing problem. Like most of the time you're making like 3 to 5 decisions that matter on the entire slate. That's it. And then everything after that is like you can have your process that leads you to other things that matter to you. But overall, like 3 to 5 decisions that you're making on the entire slate, and everything after that is like, don't spend that much time on it. That there's a handful of things that actually matter.
Right. And find out the things that matter and spend your time on those.
Yep.
And that's why good DFS players tend to have processes that get more and more simpler.
Yep.
As you get more and more simpler and more efficient. So you start out with, oh my God, it takes me to get to these great lineups to really play well. It takes me a good 4 to 6 hours. And then you find out that, oh, this hour thing that I did here really doesn't matter, right? And this half an hour that I did, and this thing that I was looking at for the past year, turns out that doesn't matter. And then this thing over here, and then you find out it's like, oh, this thing that took me an hour to do, I found a tool that could do it for me in 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, that takes away 57 minutes. And next thing you know, it's 5 years later, and your process for a sport is 12 minutes long.
Yep. And I will say that, like, this is a goals thing, right? If your goal is to be as efficient as possible and to take away a lot of that and like strip down your process a lot into building lineups in 12 minutes so that you can be as profitable in terms of return on time investment, that's awesome. If that's your goal, that's Blender's goal. You know, that's pro players' goals is to make the most money possible using the least time possible. But if your goal is to solve the puzzle utilizing a whole bunch of different things, and like you really enjoy the research process and you really enjoy the process of solving the puzzle using things that you think are impactful or testing things out or experimenting things, stuff like that, that's a different goal. And so you are going to have a different process where maybe you don't want to strip away everything and find easier ways to do things. Like Blender is a nit, and he's going to find the ways to take those things away. There are certain parts of my process as a player, not as a content creator, because as a content creator and as a model builder, I need to be as efficient as possible. But there are things in my process as a player that I just enjoy doing. And so I do them at the expense of extra return on time investment. So that's a goals thing. But if you want to find a way to make your process more efficient, there's going to be a way to find it.
Right. I find it the most fun to make money.
Right. Yes.
Like that, to me, that's the most fun. And making my intellect versus other people's intellect.
Yes. Yeah. And there are some people whose fun part of it is putting together spreadsheets and looking at well put together spreadsheets.
Right. And me, I'm not that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. There's right. Nothing wrong with either side of that. And I just want to stress that. I think that so many people get caught up in like I've done a lot of coaching sessions now, and there's a lot of people that get caught up with, oh, well, this is just a hobby, but you know, I'm subscribed to like $700 in sites, and like,
it's not a hobby.
It's not a hobby, man. You got to assess your goals. Is
that necessary? I mean, that's the question. Like, for what it is that you're doing, is it necessary?
But so
are these Excel tools necessary? They're not. I'm telling you, they're not. You can beat the game without any of these tools. You can beat the games without doing sims. You can beat the games without technically doing projections, even though you're doing projections in your head from a standpoint. I mean, you're just projecting player. Go, I think this guy's going to do well. That's technically a projection.
Yep.
So you don't have to, but it's probably easier to.
Right. Yeah. And
more likely to.
But so many people don't do that. And that's, you know, I think that's huge. The biggest leak is not knowing why you're doing something. That's the biggest leak.
Right. Yeah. I never get people that it's like, okay, why'd you build this lineup? I don't know. That's what the optimizer told me. Like, well, I don't know why you're listening to Mr. Optimizer. He's not the one putting money. He's not the one entering contests.
Right.
Right. So you should know why.
Yeah.
Right. You should. Oh, because someone else told me. Like, that's not even a good reason either.
Yeah, that's maybe the worst reason that you can find.
Right.
Someone else told me it was a good plan. You're not playing DFS for shit my money. Like, he doesn't care. Like, play DFS for you. Why are you playing DFS? What are your goals with it, man?
Okay, James. Paydirt _DFS on Twitter.
Yes, Paydirt _DFS. And you can find all of my content and my models over at paterdfs.com. I write a free report every single day called the MLB True Average Report. Less than 200 people read it most days, which is insane because it's awesome. So go read that.
That means you get that the people that do get more of an edge.
Yes, exactly. You would think that
you would no. You would want people not to. The people that read it don't want other people to read.
Right, but if you're not reading it, you're missing out. It's the prisoner problem.
The FOMO. Okay,
it's the prisoner problem.
Right,
that's what it is.
And we'll be showing off more of these tools next week, and leading up into NFL season. Like I said, the advanced version of the theory of daily fantasy sports will be out before NFL season. That's all I can promise. Before NFL season, hopefully next week. I also go away for 5 days, so that's why
I will be. Everybody should know that I will be hounding him to have it out next week.
I'll be hounding you to fix some of the stuff with the tools.
Well, it will take me not much time, Mr. Sir, to fix those things.
Right, me, I have to record 10 to 15 hours.
I was going to say it's going to take you a lot more hard time to actually do the recording than it will for me to fix UI things.
You never know. You put a 0 in the wrong spot, everything but your computer blows up.
I can promise you that it'll take me less than 15 hours to fix the
It would probably take me more than 15 hours to fix what you've done. I don't even understand what half the stuff does.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So give me those thummy thumbs on your way out the door. Thummy thumbs if you like it. If you don't like it, hit the subscribe button. If you're new here, hit the notification bell to know when we go live. MLB slate later tonight. It's just kind of a smaller one. The Grinders Live guys, Dean and everyone will be going over that MLB slate later today at 5:00 Eastern, followed by Crunch Time with Kevin Roth. So hit that notification bell. You'll always know when they go live. When we go live, when I go live, answering your DFS strategy questions like I always do on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.